Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Hi, and welcome to a very special episode of Grandma Has ADHD. I am joined very reluctantly by my oldest child, Will. I say reluctantly, but today is my 55th birthday. And Will, who did not want to appear on the podcast, said because it was my birthday, they were willing to do it. My mom, who gave birth to me 55 years ago, is joining me. And I had the idea of doing a 3 generations of ADHD in our family. And this is completely spontaneous. But as I have shared on the podcast, that ADHD is heritable. So for those of us moms who are discovering we have ADHD when our children are diagnosed, we have to start looking backwards and realizing that we were also raised by ADHD parents. So I thought it would be fun to have a conversation today on how ADHD, runs in families and what it feels like to be parented by an ADHD parent. And I will say that both for Will and for me, neither of us were parented by somebody that we knew had ADHD. I didn't discover.
I knew.
Well,
everyone knew but you.
Maybe. But I was not diagnosed until Will was diagnosed, when I looked at the psychiatrist and I said, again, I'm answering more yeses for me than for them. Do I have it? And the psychiatrist looks at me and he goes, in fact, I was more yeses. So here I am years later. And as I've shared on the podcast, the original grandma, my mom, I didn't realize she had ADHD until I knew that I had it for about 8 years. And it's been really eye-opening to discover. So I'm going to first go to Will. Will, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me on the podcast.
Tell me, what is your experience having been parented by moi?
Well, that's quite the loaded question. It was 18 years of my life. We all knew you had ADHD, and I was diagnosed, I think, at age 13 with it.
Middle school.
Yeah, 13, and so were you. But that definitely didn't manifest with you until very much more recently. But it was pretty standard. It's pretty standard experience. I remember you'd forget quite a few things. Like, for example, my 5th grade graduation, everyone else had lays when they were graduating.
Oh, wait, that wasn't that I forgot. I didn't know. You were my oldest child.
Oh, sorry.
No, that was not forgetting. Go ahead. Give me another example.
I'm trying to think. This is on the spot.
I'll tell you, well, you're supposed to be good at that. One that came up today. So Will does drag performances, works as a drag king. And I went to the performance and one of their friends met me and said, what did they say?
He said that he liked her and that she was a smaller, louder, nicer version of me.
Yeah. So, but I was, very happy to walk the stage and get attention.
She loves attention. She also, for example, her birthday is not complete unless you post on her Facebook publicly, telling everyone how you feel about her.
Professing your love.
And as someone who just deleted most of my Meta accounts for reasons, that's not possible this year. So this is how we're making up. How we're making up for another public profession of my love for my mother, because that's what she needs to feel loved.
Well, wouldn't you say that when you have ADHD, that there is a part of you that needs extra validation?
I don't know if I credit that to my ADHD. I also have very bad anxiety.
which is very common in ADHD.
Yeah, social anxiety as well. So I really do need a lot of outward validation that what I'm doing is right and that I am a good person, because my brain tells me that that's not true.
And so you know that my child has not listened to my podcast, but if they did listen to my podcast, they would have heard that that was a common refrain. A lot of people grow up with a lot of shame, and the number one coexisting condition with ADHD is actually social anxiety, which brings me to my mom. So another thing that's very interesting is that I grew up very extroverted. I did not have social anxiety. I could talk to strangers, but I remember my mom avoiding a lot of things because she did have social anxiety. So we're going to do another podcast, Mom, with you, where we talk about what this last year has been like since your discovery of ADHD. But, what do you have to contribute to the conversation of 3 generations of ADHD?
Well, since we weren't aware that it was generations, we thought it was one little boy who had ADHD, that it was a little boy who grew up with, and then he outgrew it. So we never thought, I went through years of therapy. Nobody ever questioned my depression, my anxiety, and ADHD was certainly not on the table at that point. So to find out that not only do I have it, my daughter has it, and my granddaughter, grandchild has it.
Yeah, you got it right.
Okay.
So how do you think that ADHD, now looking back on it, affected you as a parent?
I had so many phobias that I couldn't take my daughter outside and let her play because there were lizards outside, and I was terrified of lizards. So we didn't go to a lot of parks. We didn't go to outside a lot because I was terrified. And as she got older and realized I was terrified, then she liked to scare me with them. So it was, it's always been.
When you say scare, first of all, I want to put a disclaimer in there that I have never interviewed anybody with ADHD who had a fear of lizards. So that has nothing to do with my mom's ADHD that I am aware of. I do know that we like to ruminate and we will catastrophize. So it's possible maybe you saw like Godzilla and it scared you. But in all seriousness, my torment of my mother was not me like taking a lizard and bringing it to her, because I didn't want to pick them up either. But it was, oh, Mom, look, there's a lizard.
I did that to you too.
And
when
so
I was a kid.
So did Allie.
Yeah.
Allie said,
Me and my
"Yup, grandma, a lizard."
Yeah, we knew very much of her fear of lizards, and we grew up in Florida and we saw them quite a bit. And every time we did, we'd point them out to her out of love.
So, Will, what would you say? Because you're the one that's been really parented and, So, and I want to say this too about ADHD. And as I've shared, ADHD, you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person with ADHD. My mom and Will are introverted. They both love to read. And I think I shared that when Will came to me in middle school and said, I think I have ADHD, I said, no, you don't. You've been reading since you were 3, because I could not learn to read until 2nd grade because I couldn't sit still. And my mom could sit and read for hours. And that was, what she would do. Even as a child, I would want to go, go, go. And my mom would just want to sit and read a book. So how could she possibly have ADHD? So anyway, back to the question.
For me, my ADHD as an introvert in person has very much manifested in, I do get hyper-focused on things and hyper-fixated. Thank you, Benji.
That's a growling dog.
Distracting, but that's cool. He deserves. He
very distracting. As well. But squirrel, dog.
Yeah, but my ADHD, especially in my adulthood, has much more manifested in like getting invested in certain things a bit too much, and especially I found very recently. I very recently got health insurance. I was off of it for a long time, which has meant that I've been off of ADHD medication for quite some time, and I have really learned how, in adulthood, especially with the internet, my body and my brain have really kind of plotted against me with ADHD and everything. For example, like instead of being super hyperactive, for me, it's translated to something called bed rot, where I will just sit in bed and scroll through the internet and I won't be able to get up because I just can't find a routine. I can't make myself do anything beyond the present moment. I can't. I have no time concept is wonky.
Time blindness.
Time blindness. just generally can get overwhelmed with how much I have to do that I just truly don't do it. I put off doctor's appointments. I put off like anything that involves, like even a simple 2-minute phone call I will put off solely because I just can't bring myself to do it. And especially in my older life, I still am very much introverted. My favorite thing to do is always to be alone, but I've definitely had to mask it a lot. And I think ADHD has come into play with that just because I've become very good at faking being an extrovert, even though I don't know if I do it very well because I still have that voice inside my brain telling me that I'm doing it horribly. But it's been very interesting to watch my own ADHD in this more not small scale, but this different scale compared to my mom. And now knowing that my grandmother has it, I think she and I have always been very, very similar. We've always been very artistic and very similar. And now seeing that our ADHD manifests in literally the exact same way is very, very interesting. And
do you know what's so funny? So when I visited you, Will, I took pictures of your place. I also took pictures of Grandma's
place that I've lived in.
No. It was that you had collective. You know how Grandma always had like things all over her walls, and she was always like collecting art or doing projects, right? She had like a room filled with craft supplies, correct?
Yeah.
And you are similar to her in that way. So it was just funny. It was just a generational difference of interests.
Kooky, eclectic.
Yeah. Kitschy.
It's fun. I like having houses that are fun and full of stuff.
And interestingly, and I've shared, we all have different clutter tolerances. Clutter is hard for me. And I will say that when it comes to ADHD, I'm not a perfectionist, but I don't have the same amount of clutter that my mom or my child have. My OCD child, on the other hand, would say that, it's a mess.
And I actually live with someone with OCD. My long-term partner has OCD. And our clutter is both of our clutter. It's mostly mine, but they tolerate it. And they are very good with me about I'm thankful that they're very good with communication and letting me know when too much is too much. But the clutter in our house is both of our clutter. We both hate doing our laundry. We both will let it sit there in a big giant pile and not do it. And so it has been very interesting to see that different representation of how OCD manifests for them versus my sister, and proving to my mom that, not everyone with one mental illness is a certain way. And I think she's learned that over the years.
I don't like to use the word illness.
I do.
I like to use neurodivergent.
I use both. I do view my ADHD as something that hinders my life.
It absolutely can hinder your life.
And
I'm not disputing.
I definitely will not deny that. We've definitely had very different experiences with it. But I mean, this is a podcast talking openly about ADHD. I do want to acknowledge that, for me, I've spent so much of my life wishing that I didn't have it. That's definitely changing. Maybe I think it'll change even more when I'm more properly, consistently medicated for it. But I with my partner's OCD, they navigate it in different ways, and we've had a lot of conversations about the way that our mental illnesses or neurodivergencies. My partner really wants to refer to it as an illness that they are actively overcoming. But it's interesting to see the way that clutter manifests, the way that everything just kind of, the way that the way that our brains express into the real world. That was not answering the question.
No, I do. Okay, so I'm going to take you back. I'm going to rein you back in, right? So you grew up with an ADHD grandma, which of course you didn't know, but now that we know she had ADHD, can you talk about the experiences that you had when she would come over and bring?
Oh my God. So my grandma was the coolest person to hang out with when I was a kid, because it was like a never ending supply of stuff. Every time she would come over, there was like a different craft, different activity. I remember one day it was like cookies that we could draw on. And remember, this was like the early 2000s. So that stuff was like niche. No one had that. Colored cookie dough that we would make into shapes and bake. I remember one day I was sick and she made cookies with my sisters and brought them to me in bed. Whenever I would go to her house, we would do a different craft. She would just have can I swear?
Yes.
Fuck ton of stuff. Metric fuck ton of never ending stuff.
She had a room
filled with stuff. And it was always a fun little treasure hunt. So seeing her when she would come over, it would just be like a tiny little dose of that. And then when I would go see her, we'd have so much fun. It was so much fun.
Do you want to hear something funny, Will? So I will say, and this is not funny, this is being very real, but my mom had so much stuff in her house that I was really afraid of having the kids over because I was afraid that they were going to get into something.
And we did.
And so I remember when I called my mom and I said, Mom, I don't think you have hoarding disorder. I think you have undiagnosed ADHD, which is sort of how I presented it. And I said, here, Mom, listen to this podcast. But I will say as the daughter, I was constantly trying to get in and fix it and take care of it. And even with Will, when I went to visit, and interestingly, I'm not good at it myself, but I know that it is hard for me. So I actually offered to send my middle child out who is OCD, and we used to call her the cleaning lady in our house because she didn't like all of the clutter and the chaos, and she's very, very organized. And I'm like, you want me to fly her out? But I will say that it's been an issue for me with my mom. I worry about it. And it's one of the concerns that I've had with clients. And I do a lot of, working now that I'm really bringing the word out that a lot of the senior clients that we have that have clutter have ADHD. Now, sometimes it's not ADHD. It could be cognitive impairment. It could be other things, but in many cases, it is ADHD. And for the adult child who's trying to get in there and fix the problem, what I am discovering is that parents don't want their adult children parenting them. They want to still be the parent. And so that is why I've always advocated for bringing in either a professional like my company, Silver Linings Transitions, or a friend. We're in San Diego. I always like to put a plug in, but I will say just the experience that I've had has been my whole life trying to fix my mom, trying to give her the tools that she would need to make things better. And as I shared in the original episode, or maybe in another episode, I think it was the original Grandma Has ADHD episode, my mom would always say, I'm going to get around to it. I'm going to get around to it. I'm going to do it one day, like the 97% complete kind of thing. And one day I walked over with a sheet of round paper that I wrote TUIT, right? Just like, here, Mom, like, I'm hoping that you will get around to it. So I remember one time we were doing a surprise party for you, Will.
Oh my God, the story.
And so I was actually expecting my youngest. And so right around Will's birthday. So I wanted to make sure that we distinguished Will's birthday. So I asked my mom to have a spend the night with Will and to bring Will back in time for the sleepover, for the surprise party. So, the time arrives that Will's supposed to be there after everybody is there. And I'm entertaining all of these 7-year-olds. My mom has not brought Will. My mom has not brought Will. I don't think my mom's phone is charged. I think it was like an hour into the party that Will showed up for their surprise party.
I don't remember that at all. Do you?
Yes, I do.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I didn't know everyone was waiting until well afterwards, but I do remember that day. I remember
no recollection
sitting in the
of that.
car. I remember, this is off topic. Never mind. It wasn't related. It was related to another aspect of the party, but it's not ADHD related.
Okay, so we'll skip it because we can go on a squirrel tangent. Do you guys want to hear something really interesting that I learned that I think might be? So I don't know if you know this about me because you guys know that I'm super extroverted and I'm happy to be around people, right? And so they will compare that behavior to a squirrel. And I'm just like, jump, 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 jump. But I actually am also, and I learned this from Wilma Feldman, who was on an earlier episode. She actually labeled herself a squirtle because I actually am also a turtle. And I think I've shared with you guys that I'm excited to go somewhere. And then I'm excited I got to go. I hit my wall and I got to go. And I never heard anybody else define it, but you guys think I'm always on, but I don't, I can't. I do hit that spot where I have to retreat. So my new spirit animal is Squirtle.
That's a Pokemon, right?
Yes, but she came up with it first. She shared that with me.
Pokemon has it copyrighted.
Well, but she did come up with it. If you look, anyway, we're not getting into that.
Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, if you guys are listening to this, hopefully you're listening. Otherwise, what are we doing it for? So you are listening to this podcast. What would you say to the generations of people? So we're going to have the adult children listening who are likely sandwiched in between. We're going to have seniors who are discovering their ADHD. And hopefully we're going to have the millennials and the Gen Zers who, I don't even think you guys listen to podcasts, do you?
Oh, we do.
Okay. You just don't listen to Gen Xers doing podcasts.
Oh, not necessarily. I love a good Gen Xer. I think you need I think the generational divide is much more fabricated on behalf of the Gen Xers who want to think that we don't listen to them. For us, it's more so like if I care about a topic, if we like a topic, we like a host, we'll listen to it. I don't really care how old they are.
Anyway, okay, so back to the original question. If somebody's listening?
If someone is listening, I think all I want to say is it's hard to not feel a little bit of sadness and upset that it took your diagnosis for people in your family to realize stuff about themselves. I've dealt with that a lot, of feeling like a lot of who I am has been so much of a learning experience for other people, more so than it has been for me. And ADHD has definitely been a big part of that. My own diagnosis gave birth to all of this. And my mom didn't know how to handle me at the time, and she's learning. And I'm really proud of her about so many things in that regard, just learning and growing. But I want people to know that like it's okay to acknowledge that growth and acknowledge that like the happiness that's come with that, but also acknowledge that, yeah, that fucking sucks to have it take so long. And it's great that mental health is coming so far, but it is valid to feel a little bit upset and a little bit hurt that it took so long, and that you are enough. Your own journey matters, and you are there. It's good that you're there for the people, helping other people, but I hope you are taking care of yourself and that they're taking care of you.
Right. I think self-acceptance has really been such a big part of why I am doing this. And especially, gearing it towards a generation that we talked about this, would not acknowledge any mental health, didn't go to therapy. Like in your generation, it's very common. Nobody keeps it a secret that they're in therapy. In fact, I used to say I wouldn't date somebody that wouldn't go to therapy or hadn't gone to
I still
therapy.
do.
But your generation, that was not the norm, correct?
Right.
So, you had to toughen it up. And I know you really, and we're going to have another conversation separately from this one where we talk about my mom's discovery of ADHD and how it's impacted her this past year, because it has only been a year. But I know that you've said that you have some regret that you didn't know. I've shared openly, my mom is really bright, like reads everything. And you would agree, right? Very, very bright, but never had confidence. And never could finish. And also now I understand when you would say, I can't concentrate. Like I said, I've had a completely different understanding of my mom. And I will also share that my ADHD has gotten worse. As I shared, I'm 55 today, and I'm definitely impacted by the loss of estrogen. And I am seeing...
Tell me about it.
I am seeing my own forgetfulness, and I'm having to put more things in place because I'm recognizing I'm, struggling more than I've ever struggled. So Mom, what would you say to the grandchildren and the adult children and your peers who are listening to this intergenerational podcast?
Good question.
It's a loaded question.
Do you need me to pause so you can think for a minute?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to take a pause and you'll hear from our sponsor. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently. And for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com.
And what was the question?
You laugh like your father. So the question was, Mom, what do you want to say to the grandchildren and the adult children and your peers who are listening?
Okay. Nothing like being put on the spot.
Took a whole pause.
We did.
I know. but some of us ADHDers need more time than others because I didn't know I had it. I always felt different, very self-confident, very
Conscious.
self-conscious. Thank you. Self-conscious and just inadequate. And I looked at all my cousins who have all achieved big things, and my child who has accomplished big things. And I always felt like I wasn't as good as they were. The ADHD has given me reasons to kind of forgive myself for the failings that I've had, realizing I did as well as I could given the circumstances and not knowing that this was what I was dealing with. The depression, as I said, since I was 14, when they started me on tranquilizers and anti-anxiety medication, has been my crutch. I can't do or go or anything without my crutches. And it's when I tell my friends that I've been diagnosed with ADHD, they all go, no, not you. And I'm going, what don't you see that I've done that's this way? And one thing I did find out through a birthday card just recently, a friend of mine said, we love our friends for all their faults and everything. And she said, and that's part of why we love you, because you're different and you look at things differently and you respond to things differently. And I've always felt a little humor was going to get me through. If you could laugh about it, then it's not so bad. And I have...
and I will say that's actually one of my top 2 character strengths is humor. Honesty, second by humor. And I agree. I laugh when the situations are hard, and it does help. That's a very common ADHD characteristic. And I really like what you were saying. And I think that was really helpful for people here. So I don't want to cut you off because that was good.
Well, that was, it's true. And I do tell people I have it now that I know. And everything I read has picked up more and more on women who have it, women my age and older, who had no idea through their whole lives. And some people say, oh, I have that, but very few. And once in a while you hear my grandchild has it, but it's still not mainstream. It's like we're pulling it into the next century, step by step. And therapy is now accepted. It's kind of expected. You don't think anything when you hear a child is in therapy. And now I don't think anything of parents who are in therapy. Some have been like me a long time. And as a matter of fact, when I was 66, I went to get therapy because I was in a real bad place. And none of the doctors would take me because I was too old. And I thought, if you're 66, who deserves it more? I mean, the kids deserve it, but grandparents and seniors are going through their own different thing, and they need the help for somebody to kind of show a mirror up to their face and say, this is you, and this is what happens, and it's not such a bad thing.
And they don't have the coping skills that a lot of people my age were brought up with.
That's absolutely true.
Because those coping skills were actively discouraged.
Right.
And I that sucks.
Well, and that's one of my big platforms is why, I think I've shared that the woman who wrote the only book that exists on ADHD and seniors, Dr. Kathleen Nadeau, when she was on the podcast, shared how difficult it was to get the book published because seniors in our society are dismissed and marginalized, and there is ageism. And, as far as I'm concerned, I'm going to be an active member of society and I'm going to contribute until my last breath. It's the responsibility that I have to society, and it's the responsibility that I have to my children who are watching how I go into aging. And as I am now 55 years old and seeing, women who are no longer beautiful and, young, how we are pushed aside.
You should watch The Substance.
Anyway. So, and I really appreciate what you said, Mom. And she touched on a couple other things that I want to bring up. And that is how many people actually have been treated for anxiety and depression. They now believe that had they been properly diagnosed with ADHD and could have been treated for that, a lot of the anxiety and depression might not have existed. Now, they can occur also, and they are very common with ADHD, but that is part of the problem, is that we are, in fact, 1 in 5 memory care clinics are even routinely asking questions about ADHD. Most doctors, when they are in medical school, they get like an hour on ADHD. I mean, we are underinformed in our society. And, although Will doesn't like to hear this, I can see so much of my ADHD in almost everything that I do. But I also want to say this, and you can see this as an example. When you meet one person with ADHD, you meet one person, we share some traits. And like my mom's cousins, a couple of them actually have ADHD and are successful. In fact, they think it could be up to 50% of entrepreneurs have ADHD, but it has to be learned to channel, which I want to bring back to something that you said. When Penn Holderness, I shared that I was at the International ADHD Conference, and Penn Holderness was the keynote speaker. He is a famous social media influencer who's very open about his ADHD. And he gave the keynote, and he said that if you could have given him a button to take off or turn off his ADHD, he said in school and in college, he would 100% want to turn it off. He said, but as an adult, he is so appreciative. And when I think, again, Mom, you didn't know and you had to deal with it. But for me, I do see the gifts. And I do see the times that I offended people because I didn't have a filter, right? And I know for myself, I would have achieved more than I did because I was always procrastinating on my assignments, and I was always doing the assignment like the day before it was due or the class before it was due, or I wasn't completely, tuning in, or maybe I didn't take the major in what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to law school, but I don't laugh. But I didn't think that I would be able to get through the cases, and I would have made an amazing attorney.
But being an attorney is like 3/4 paperwork.
So here I am. I'm a podcast host rather than an attorney.
Just like every other straight alpha male. Good job.
I don't know where to go with that. So, do you guys have any closing words for our listeners, or anything that you're going to, I always hate when I should have said that. Anything you wish you had said?
No, I'm good.
Anyway, I do want to publicly apologize to my child because I did discredit the ADHD when, like I said, shared. I didn't believe that Will had it. I didn't understand the impact that it had. And, I could have been better at like making sure the homework was turned in. And I could have, although I would say you did pretty well in school. Well, you got into a good school and you graduated with honors.
I did.
So
for the record, I got my BFA in theater education from a liberal arts college.
Well, that does mean broke fucking artist. We told you.
It does mean
but you wanted to do it.
And I did. And
now you're a drag king.
Now I'm a drag king, which requires no degree and absolutely no self-consciousness, I guess.
Oh, I do. Did you notice that we all lose words? That's also a very common ADHD trait. It's also common for seniors to lose words, but it's also very common in ADHD. Mom, anything else that you want to share? This is going to be fun. This is going to live in perpetuity, which
boy.
Don't you love it?
I'm sure I will.
Okay, Mom, anything else?
No, you say you forget words, and people my age freak. My mother used to freak. Oh no, and I said, you're fine. You're not losing it. You're fine. And that's one of the things that, because I drop a lot of words and they come back to me pretty soon after whatever's doing is over. But I do have an answer, not always at the minute I should, but I try to encourage my friends. This is not itis. This is, everybody does it. I mean, we all drop them. We drop them when we're younger. We just don't pay attention because nobody's afraid.
Correct.
We're not afraid of Alzheimer's.
Interesting.
You realize why? So for context, I'm a teacher, dealt with a lot of young kids. I used to do a thing where I would count how many times someone would say the word like in a single sentence or like response, because it's literally just a filler word for picking up where you are finding your words.
Well, when I'm giving a talk, I'll take a sip of water when I lose my word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that. Getting on to a completely different topic when you're trying to close out the podcast.
Trying to
What
anyway,
better conclusion?
Yes, I think we are embodying ADHD in 3 generations. I'm super happy to have these lovely people in my life where I literally am sandwiched. And I thank you for tuning in. And as you know, I really, truly am on a mission to make the rest of your life the best of your life because, age does not define you. In fact, I think as we age, we have more to offer because we have the wisdom behind all of the choices that we've made. So thank you so much for being part of my birthday podcast episode. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.